On a cold January day, a 43-year-old man was sworn in as the chief executive of his country. He was raised Catholic. He was preceded by a famous general who had commanded the nation's armed forces in a major war, and he stayed up celebrating his inauguration with massive parades until 3 o'clock in the morning. Most people hear that description and assume it belongs to John F. Kennedy, but the date was January 30th, 1933. I am describing Adolf Hitler. We make decisions based on what we think we know. When people believed the earth was flat, they stayed put, afraid they might fall off the edge. Once we discovered the world was round, behaviors changed. Trade routes opened, and new ideas began to travel. Just as that geographical assumption restricted exploration, our current assumptions about what motivates humans restrict our understanding of leadership and success.
Today, we operate under a modern flat Earth assumption that world-changing success requires massive funding, an elite education, and perfect market conditions. In the early 1900s, Samuel Pierpont Langley embodied that formula. He set out to be the first man to pilot an airplane. He was backed by a $50,000 grant from the War Department, a fortune at the time. He held a mathematics professorship at Harvard. He counted Andrew Carnegie and Alexander Graham Bell among his friends, and he hired the most talented minds of the day. A few hundred miles away, Wilbur and Orville Wright were working on their own flying machine in a bicycle shop. They had no government grants and no high-level connections. Not a single person on their team had a college education. Under conventional assumptions, Langley's victory was a mathematical certainty, while the Wright brothers were destined to fail. Yet on December 17, 1903, the under-resourced Wright brothers achieved the first manned flight. Langley's dream team failed. To understand why the better-equipped team lost, we have to look at how we influence behavior. There are exactly two ways to do it. You can manipulate it, or you can inspire it. Manipulation, often framed as motivation, relies on carrots and sticks. It uses external incentives like bonuses or the threat of being fired. It drives short-term transactions, but it fails to generate deep loyalty. The Wright brothers used inspiration. They started with a why, a belief that their flying machine could change the world. By sharing that vision, they attracted a dedicated group who shared that exact same belief. Langley used his resources to buy a team of experts who worked for a paycheck. The Wright brothers inspired a team to work for a shared purpose, proving that internal drive conquered external resources. This pattern repeats itself in the business world. We see it clearly in the personal computer revolution of the 1970s. At the time, early computer technology was viewed as a complicated tool reserved for large corporations. It was too expensive and too difficult for the average person. Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs approached the technology from a different angle. They held a specific belief that the personal computer could empower the individual to take on giant corporations. Driven by that internal belief, they designed a machine that was simple and affordable. In just 6 years, their operation grew from a tiny project into a billion-dollar company with over 3,000 employees. Apple moved beyond selling circuit boards. They mobilized a community of people who bought into their underlying cause of leveling the playing field. The architecture of influence extends to social change as well. We can map it directly onto the civil rights movement of the 1960s. On August 28, 1963, 250,000 people descended on the nation's capital. The organizers did not send out thousands of invitations, and there was no internet to organize the masses. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. succeeded because he articulated a belief system. He presented a vision that resonated on a deeply visceral level with tens of thousands of citizens. That massive crowd did not travel across the country for Dr. King. They showed up for themselves, united by their own aligned beliefs. Lasting change requires a unifying vision that transforms disconnected citizens into a driven collective. There's a difference between a leader and those who lead. Leaders hold a position of power. Those who lead actually inspire us to act. This chart shows inspiration's impact. Comparing external incentives versus loyalty reveals a stark divergence. Inspired followers break standard economic models. Yet studies show 80% of people lack their dream job, operating in organizations relying on carrots and sticks rather than a shared purpose. To build environments where trust and loyalty are the norm, organizations must abandon incentive-first thinking. Long-lasting impact doesn't start with proper incentives. It begins by having the courage to start with why.